Hi, folks. Welcome to Crisco's Corner. Welcome back. And those that are new, welcome. At least 100 dead. Now it's up to 1,000. As Hamas launches unprecedented attack on Israel, Netanyahu says nation is at war. Hundreds wounded as Hamas terrorists launched rocket attacks and invaded Israel with guns from all different parts of Israel. This was a coordinated attack. But I'm going to give you my opinion, I think, how Israel went wrong, and they may be able to correct it as we read this article. Iran-backed Hamas terrorists invaded areas of southern Israel with rocket barrages launched from the Gaza Strip. Struck the air on Saturday, killing at least, now it's up to 1,000 Israelis, in an attack the Islamic movement Hamas has taken responsibility for. A senior Hamas commander, Mohammed Daif, announced the start of the operation, which called Palestinians everywhere to attack the Israelis, saying in a broadcast on Hamas media that the group launched 5,000 rockets and calling the attack the day of the greatest battle to end the last occupation on earth. Now, they've attacked Israel from all over the place. Some people were saying they were coming in parachutists, like paratroopers, all over the place, hitting rural areas, small areas of Israel, as well as launching, like they said, 5,000 rockets into Israel itself. I'm not taking the Arab side. I'm all for Israel. I think Israel's going to retaliate 10 times worse, and now gives Israelis an opportunity to really, maybe not clean out forever, but cause serious damage to Gaza, as well as the Hamas and Palestinian militants. But my question is this, and I hope the Israelis fix this. The Israelis have the best intelligence services of anywhere in the world. Mossad and their other intelligence services in military intelligence are the best there is. Mossad is feared by everybody, including the Americans. How come they weren't tipped off with this? It takes months and months and months of training to train the Palestinians to do this attack, to set up, we'll say it's not as much as 5,000, that's probably being a little bragger, but it's got to be at least 3,000 rockets all over. How do they get set up without word getting out? I think this is an intelligence failure. Now, I'm not saying that Mossad is worthless, but they're going to have to look internally and see how this happened outside of their eye. Or they saw some of it, and maybe Mossad is very much getting infiltrated with progressives like the CIA, the FBI, and the DOJ is. Maybe that's the case. Or maybe they can clean house. But this is an opportunity for the Israelis to bolster up Mossad and their intelligence services and just wreak havoc. You're allowed to defend yourself. Now, the problem's going to be, are the softliners, i.e. the progressives, what we call in U.S. progressive Democrats, are they going to say to the Israeli Defense League, well, just do a retaliatory strike of equal strength? No. This is an opportunity now for the Israelis to go all out. Am I saying the Israelis are perfect? No. But you know what, though? They have a right to exist, and they have a right to defend themselves. And the other part I can't figure out is why? Palestine and the Gaza and Hamas and all of them and Iran, and in the old days, it was all the Arab countries. I'm old enough to remember when Israel was invaded in the early 1970s. 1973, I was a junior in high school. I remember very well what happened and how the Israelis kicked all their asses. Yes, they had help from the U.S., but they kicked all their asses twice. One war lasted a week. That's why they call it the 7 Days War. Israelis don't play because they have the, what's the word I'm looking for? Internally, they know if they lose a war, they won't survive. Literally won't survive. The ghosts of World War II and the things that happened in Europe in the late 30s through the first half of the 1940s are etched into people's minds now. Of a couple of generations gone by, since the 1973 Yom Kippur War? Yeah, maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But the young people now that are there that have lived a pretty good life in Israel for the last 2 generations are seeing that their survival is at stake again. Now, is Hamas going to wipe out Israel? Of course not. It's just too strong and too well equipped. That's not the point. Maybe it's waking up a whole new generation of Israelis that are saying, hey, us live together in harmony and live and let live, and they're people too. Maybe we ought to change our thinking. I'm not saying the Israelis aren't, or the Palestinians aren't people. What I'm trying to say is that there's a small percent, maybe 10, 20% of the Palestinians that are militants, very much like Germany in the 1930s, very much like the U.S. with the Democrats. There's no majority of Democrats that are progressive nut bars. It's 10, 15, 20% that have taken over the party. This is no different. I'm not saying the Democrats are terrorists, so don't get me wrong. What I'm talking about is the comparison that a small percent of a group can take over the rest of the group. You don't have to have a majority. Hospitals are treating at least 985 wounded. Now it's up to several thousand. People, including 77 who were in critical condition, Associated Press report based on public statements and calls to hospitals. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, announced it would mobilize its forces in response to the attacks. Remember, military service is mandatory in Israel, no matter if you're male or female. Remember that. So every Israeli, basically over 22, 23 years old, very much knows how to fire a gun. They're very familiar with it because they had, I think it's a 2-year term they have to serve in the military. I don't remember. But they're familiar with weapons. Now, some may not like it, but they certainly know how to use them. Hamas has taken hostages and held prisoners of war in Gaza. Israeli military forces have moved troops to the Gaza border, where gunfire was already started as the forces moved towards each other. Yeah. And they know the Israelis are coming. And they're going to be met 10 times worse. It's amazing to me. But I have to ask myself this. Why now? Yeah, it's the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. I get it. It shows I'm getting much older, which I don't like. But the fact of the matter is it just because it was the 50th anniversary? What is the end game here? Now, they know they're never going to wipe out Israel. Never. If it gets to the point where it's so bad that Israel thinks they're going to be exterminated, and that's the proper words to use, they have nukes, and they will use them. There's nothing worse than a powerful animal backed into a corner. Believe me, the Israelis will go down to the last person, the last man, the last woman. Make no mistake. So what is the point here? Just to keep terrorism going? I don't understand. Some people say it's the weakness of the Biden administration, and in part, I believe that's true. The $6 million in assets that were unfroze, they were Iranian given back to them. Yeah, it didn't finance this, but it certainly put more money in the Iranian coffers. That's also true. I don't understand the reasoning. Even crazy people have a reason, and they know they can't win. They know they can't overrun Israel, not with the forces they have. And it isn't like 1973 and the other Israeli Arab wars, where all of the Arab countries were sending in military all at once surrounding Israel. That includes Qatar, that includes Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, all of them, Egypt. They all sent troops against Israel. There's no Egyptian troops, to my knowledge. Might be some individuals, but the Egyptian government is not sanctioning this. Neither is the Saudis. Neither is the other Arab countries. So it is different. Hamas is not a military group. It's a terrorist group. It's really that simple. Maybe it's just simple terrorism. But this is very expensive. Thousands of rockets, training hundreds, if not thousands of men. The training that goes on took 6 months probably to set all this up, maybe longer. Where was the Israeli intelligence services? Maybe we'll get an answer someday. According to Israeli media, gunmen opened fired on passersby in a small Israeli town, southern Israeli town, and footage of the fighting appeared to show attacks in many cities on the streets. a number of terrorists have been infiltrated into Israeli territory from the Gaza Strip. Now, that's the other thing. The Israeli intelligence services, Mossad, and the other military services are very good. And my understanding is, and it's common knowledge among the Iranians too, that there are Mossad agents inside Iran, in Tehran, in the nuclear testing where they're enriching the uranium. Mossad agents are everywhere. Just like during the Cold War, Soviet agents were all over D.C., and we had agents all over Moscow. It's really the same, but on a much smaller scale. Yes, Hamas and the Palestinians have agents inside Israel, but Israel has way many more agents inside so-called enemy territory, in this case Iran and Palestine, than they have the reverse. That's the other point. With all these agents there, how come they weren't alerted? I don't understand. And there's a picture there of a fire from a rocket that hit. You see a parking lot. You see some cars there all burned up in southern Israel. The Israeli Defense Forces will defend Israeli citizens, and the Hamas terrorist organization will pay a heavy price, the military said. Netanyahu, I'm not saying he's delighting in this, but he talked about a retaliatory strike, and I am a Netanyahu fan. Him and President Trump are very close, personally. I don't mean just in politics. And that's another thing when I mentioned President Trump. Do you think for 1 minute that what would have happened in Israel would have happened if President Trump was still there? All you Trump haters, put except for the cult members, which I can't talk to or try to deal with, but the people that are on the fence, whether you hate Donald Trump's guts or not, that's a true statement. All the things that are going on, the millions that are overrunning our border, the total cluster that was the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And those of you that are still blaming Trump for that, I mean, get your head out of your asses, okay? You know, if it starts pouring rain outside or we get some snow and it shouldn't get, it's Trump's fault. I mean, everything is Trump's fault. I mean, not the cult members, the rational people that are left. We all know, well, John, how can you predict? Believe me, I would bet all the money I have, which isn't much, but all the money I would have, I would bet that if Trump was still president, this wouldn't have happened. So people think about that when next year comes around. What about Ukraine? That wouldn't have happened either. All the things they said would happen when Trump was elected in 2016 have happened under the Biden administration. That is a simple fact. The sound of rocket launches could be heard in Gaza as residents reported arms clash among the separation fence with Israel near the border. Well, of course. Significant movement of armed fighters, you betcha. The UN, the National Security Council spokesman, now they're about as worthless as tits on a bull, unequivocally condemned the attacks, calling them unprovoked and stressing that there is never any justification for terrorism. Yeah, but then you get the squad members from our own U.S. Congress saying as soon as Israel was hit with all these thousands of rockets and ground troops in the small towns in southern Israel, they immediately called for a ceasefire. Yeah, after the damage was done, no thanks. No thanks. And there's protests now. In fact, I might just go to that, do another story on that. There's protests in New York City. Everybody carrying Palestinian flags. And the only reason why they're allowed to do that is because we have a free society. And you have a right to be an ass. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has spoken to Israeli National Security Advisor, and we remain in close contact with our Israeli partners. All they want is arms. And he sees a rocket there fired toward Israel from the Gaza Strip. That's a serious rocket. And several thousand of those, by the way, have been fired. They could not have been set up without somebody seeing them. This is the part I don't get. Is it one of those deals that the intelligence service of Israel saw it and saw as an opportunity to really take out Hamas and the militant group, the Palestinians? Kind of like what people say it happened in Pearl Harbor, that FDR knew about it, but we got into the war after. I'm not so sure. I don't think that's true. U.S. charge the affairs of the U.S. Embassy in Israel, Stephen Hallett, wrote on X, formerly Twitter, sickened by the images coming out of southern Israel, dead and wounded civilians at the hands of terrorists from Gaza. The United States stands with Israel. And what's going to happen This is a propaganda war like most wars. Even World War II was a propaganda war. World War I was a propaganda war. The American Civil War was a propaganda war. They're going to show pictures of dead children and dead pregnant women on both sides. It's going to happen. It's just, unfortunately, it's the sick, disgusting things that happen in war. And how is the American media, the cable news networks, going to handle it? Are they only going to show the things that Israel did? When you send in arms and you go to war in urban areas, sadly, civilians get killed, and very much, even more sadly, some of them are children. It just turns my stomach and hurts my heart. It's terrorism in its most despicable form. It has a right to defend itself against heinous attacks. German Chancellor said the terrorist rocket fire and rising violence shock us deeply. Yeah, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm really not. NATO is worthless. French President Macron, I won't even read what he has to say. My full solidarity to the victims, their families, and their loved ones. Oh, yeah. Geez, Emmanuel, I'm so impressed with that. Now, here's a picture I thought was interesting. This is a Palestinian celebrating on a destroyed Israeli tank at the Gaza Strip fence. You see the fence in the background. Let me ask you a question. They're standing on the tank celebrating. The tank is on fire. That tank is filled with fuel while it's burning. What kind of a moron would stand on top of a tank, a military vehicle, filled with fuel that's burning? I mean, how, on the level of stupid? I can see maybe if the fire was out, they're standing there for propaganda purposes. Look what we captured. Yeah, hurrah, great for us. But not while it's burning with fuel in it. Stupid. Idiot. And to all you French speakers out there, idiot. French Prime Minister of Great Britain said he was shocked. Yeah. I don't believe any of those guys. In accordance with assessments by the Israeli Defense Establishment, Minister of Defense has announced a special security situation, which means they changed some of the rules as far as, civilians and some of the rights that they have during wartime. There's been fighting between Israel and Gaza in years past, and the fighting that started on Saturday is expected to last several days. Now, there's going to be an immediate response from the Israelis as they, and I'll show the picture here, as they fight back immediately. But it's going to take several days to coordinate a retaliatory strike. They have to take out, of course, all the missile sites first. Their Iron Dome, I'm not sure how effective that was. That's been helping Israel for a long time. Maybe this is Iran, I'll say Iran, Palestine, because they're one and the same. The Iran, Palestine, thinking that launching hundreds, if not thousands, of missiles at once will overwhelm the so-called Iron Dome. I don't know. The Iron Dome has worked really effectively in the past years. But this is extremely expensive, firing those kind of rockets, training people, training men. This costs hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more, to Iran and the Palestinian government. Now, we all know they're getting money from them, but money is still money. How are they going to justify another one? They'll never be able to do this in another 10 years. So we're going to have to see what Israel does. I know what I would do, but this website won't allow that kind of commentary. And sadly, civilians are going to get killed on both sides, and especially children, which just hurts my heart like you don't even know. I don't care what side you're on. Hurting children is, I used to say it in Italian, is an infamia. It's incredible. But Israel has a right to exist. They have a right to defend themselves. And we're going to have to see what happens. I think it's a weak response from the Biden administration. Now, we're going to be sending them arms, probably, or send them money to buy arms. And then people say, well, that's going to fuel the military-industrial complex. Well, what the hell are you supposed to do? What the hell are you supposed to do? And there's one thing that Iran and Palestine forget, and I mentioned it earlier, and I'll leave this video because it's running long. Every adult Israeli citizen unless they have some kind of physical handicap, has served in the military. So if it gets to the point where it's street-to-street fighting, which won't happen, but if it does in Israel, make no mistake, the average Israeli citizen is very much like rural America. They are all familiar with firearms and knowing how to use them effectively. So think about that, Iran, Palestine. Think about that. Until the next time, God bless, goodbye, and good luck.